Hi, if you're new here, hello, I'm Estonia, and recently there've been a ton of cozy game demos appearing on Steam during the Steam Next Fest, so I decided to spend some time trying out a bunch of them. In this video, I'm going to be playing through 15 cozy game demos to see which ones are actually worth checking out. Some of these games are already out while others are still upcoming, but with that, there's one quick thing I'd like to mention before we start. If I talk about any bugs or issues, it's just to give an honest representation of my experience with the demo. A lot of these are early versions of the games, many made by small teams, so things are obviously still subject to change, so just keep that in mind when watching. With that being said, let's get into it. Thrifty Business is a cozy shop management game where you take over your own vintage thrift store and slowly turn it into a welcoming place for the local community. The game kind of uses the unpacking mechanic, if you've ever played that game before, where most of your time is spent sorting through boxes of second-hand items and arranging them around your shop however you like. There's things from clothes to toys and antiques and other objects that can be placed on either shelves or racks. When it comes to cozy games, I usually enjoy ones where I have a bit more control over what's going on, whereas this one is much more hands-off. Once you've unpacked all your items, you can open the store, and from there till it closes, it's kind of like an idle sim. You just click on the customers at the counter to check them out and click on any rubbish that they leave on the store floor. That's kind of the whole game. There was one major thing though that stopped me from enjoying this game as much as I probably should have, and that's the fact that the screen constantly scrolled down when I'm not doing anything with it. Like, I literally pulled my hands away from the keyboard at one point just to see what would happen, and the game kept scrolling until it went completely off the screen. This means when I'm trying to stock the shelves, I'm constantly having to use the keys to move the screen back up so I can actually see the full bookshelf to place the items on it. I genuinely don't know if this was an intentional design choice or if it's just some sort of bug that I had. Either way, it really hindered the experience for me, and it felt like I was constantly fighting against the controls just to keep the shop visible on the screen. Editing Estonia here, I was having a look through the Steam page, and sometimes it shows like live streams of people playing the game that you're looking at, and I noticed someone was playing the game and the screen was just not scrolling down like it did in mine, so I don't know if something was up with my game, if it was like a setting I could turn off, or if it was like a bug or something. I really don't know, but just keep in mind that I don't think that this was intentional because of that. Apart from that though, I do think the game is really cute. The design is very bold and colourful, and I've actually played another game by this developer called Ritual of Raven for one of my previous cozy game videos, so if you like this video then I'll definitely go check that one out too afterwards. But when I was browsing through the demos, I immediately recognised the style from that game. In that video, I mentioned how much I love the bold neon colours that they use, because a lot of cozy games tend to lean towards more muted or natural colour palettes. This one just completely goes the opposite direction, and I think it really works for their style and the branding of their games. You can expand the store eventually too, and with that expansion you unlock space to host events. Even though the game itself is very relaxing and fairly simple, adding things like shop expansions and events to unlock, having to go on your phone's marketplace to buy new stuff for the store, just gives a bit more to do and makes it feel slightly more interesting. You get a calendar where you can drag events onto specific days to schedule them, and there's also little requests you can accept where customers ask for specific items, and that gives you something to look out for when you're buying boxes to stock the shop too. One thing I did notice is that you can't pause the game when customers are leaving the store. You can tidy things up the next morning before opening the shop again, but I would have liked the option to clean the store at the end of the day once the last customer has left, so it's all just neat and ready for the next day. Instead, you kind of have to live with the mess until the following morning. This is definitely one of those games that you'll probably dip into here and there rather than play for long stretches. After around the 30-minute mark of playing the demo, I felt fairly done with it, and just to clarify, that's not really a fault of the game itself, it's just a very hands-off experience by design. There's also not really any challenge to it. If you enjoy something really cozy and relaxing like the developer's other game Sticky Business, this game basically feels like an upgrade on that idea with more complex mechanics like customers actually coming into a physical shop. But if you're looking for something with a bit more gameplay in your cozy games, I'd probably give this one a pass. It just sits slightly above being an idle sim for me, with regular customers who come into the shop and telling you a bit about their lives and the events that you can host in the store. Most people who come in will often buy something, so you end up making a decent amount of money without much effort anyway. You're never really struggling for money in that regard. That being said, I also don't think the game is promising anything more than what it actually delivers on, and that's a good thing. On the Steam page, the developers even list things that you're not going to find in the game, including things like no stressful min-maxing to get the best profit, no setting the item prices, no haggling, and no impatient customers storming out of the store. So it really is all about just decorating the shop and stocking the shelves rather than running a complex shop management system, which I think will actually be really appealing for some people who prefer that kind of cozy game experience. Flock Around is a multiplayer exploration game centered around birdwatching and wildlife photography. I try not to compare games too much and prefer to look at them as their own thing, but it's pretty clear that this is the developer's take on the cozy multiplayer genre of game that web fishing really popularized. There's quite a few of these games coming out recently too that I could have played in place of this one. For example, the frog sledding one is one I can think of, but I decided to give this one a go instead. In Flock Around, you play as a bird watcher wandering around a nature sanctuary, with the main goal being to spot different bird species and photograph them to fill out your own in-game guidebook. Starting out with some positives here, the birds actually have a little bit of behaviour to them. If you get too close or move too quickly, you'll scare them off, so sometimes you have to really slow down and approach them carefully if you want to get a good shot. The whole experience is also incredibly relaxed, with gameplay being really simple. You find the birds, you photograph them, sell the photos, and repeat. It's one of those games that you can just kind of switch on and chill without worrying about anything being too complicated. Also, if you're someone who enjoys collecting things, the guidebook system is also quite satisfying. Every new bird you find gets added to your book, and the game encourages you to photograph them in different poses or situations to fully complete their entry. That gives you a nice little goal to work towards whilst exploring, and it does a good job of motivating you to keep playing the game, wandering around the environments and looking for the species that you're still missing from the guidebook. There are a few areas where I think the game could grow a little bit though. At the moment, the demo feels quite minimal and the map itself is fairly small, so after a while the environment can start to feel a little repetitive. Adding more secrets or interactive elements around the map could really help me to have an incentive around exploring the world a bit more. The photography system could also probably use a bit of balancing. Right now it's quite easy to spam photos of the same bird and just sell them repeatedly to make money quickly. The devs have thought of that, with the first photo you take selling for way more and then those after selling at a lower price, but even with that I could make money very quickly just spamming the camera. I'd also love to see the birds develop a little bit more personality. At the moment all of them behave in the exact same way, so adding unique behaviours could make discovering a new species feel a bit more exciting. Things like mating dances, birds digging for worms, building nests, or even being able to place things like bird feeders or bird baths and watching what shows up could add a whole lot more to the experience and make the world feel alive because of it. I also did a quick search of bird behaviours and it just brings up loads of ideas that could help towards this goal. I don't know if you knew this, but praying mantises have been known to hunt hummingbirds, and woodpeckers actually lose their red caps as they get older. I chose these two to make comments on because these are two birds that are actually in the game. Small little bits of information or behaviours like that could make discovering the new bird feel way more exciting, because instead of it just being like, here's a new bird, take a photo of it and move on, you'd start wondering what makes that particular species interesting or different from the last one you found. It would also motivate you to actually follow the bird around a little bit more to see how it uniquely interacts with the world in comparison to the other birds you've seen previously. That said, I think it's really important to mention that this game has been made by a small team of just 3 developers, so honestly, what is here is already super impressive. For such a small team, the foundation is already there, and with a bit more depth and personality added over time, I think this could easily become a really special cozy multiplayer game. Overall, Flock Around is a relaxing little wildlife game, and I can imagine when it fully releases, it'll be a fun one to jump into with friends, and whilst it still feels like it's really in its early stages of development, the potential there is definitely exciting. In Hozy, you have to restore houses from the ground up. That includes painting the walls, scrubbing the windows, and mopping all of the floors, and once you're done with that though, the game gives you a bunch of boxes to unpack, and you're given complete creative freedom to place the items wherever you want, designing the space exactly how you like. This game was a really fun experience. I personally enjoyed it a little bit more than Thrifty Business, and I only mention that game because both of them heavily feature the mechanic of unpacking goods from boxes and placing them wherever you want. This time, however, rather than just taking inspiration from the game unpacking, it feels like Hozy mixes that mechanic with Power Wash Simulator as well, as you scrub the windows and wipe the floors. This part of the game was actually the most satisfying bit for me. I just think the developers really nailed the sound design, and it makes the cleaning process feel super satisfying because of that. In the demo, there were 3 houses to decorate, and each one offered something completely stylistically different from the last. When you go into a new level, there's actually a little description about who's moving into the house, their personality, and a character portrait of them, so you can really start to envision the type of person who's going to be living in this space. As you unpack, you also get the chance to click on certain items and learn a little bit more about the person from them. Even without that text though, you can still gather a lot just from the items that you're pulling out of the boxes. This person, for example, is definitely an accomplished musician. They have a lot of awards and also a huge variety variety of different instruments that they play. Another character is clearly an artist working with different mediums like ceramics as well as more traditional painting. So instead of unpacking for just one person and following their story throughout their life like the game Unpacking does, this one feels a little bit more like a Whisper of the House kind of experience, where you're unpacking for lots of different people and piecing together who they are through the items they own. I'm often not the target audience for these type of games, but I'm always open to trying them. In a previous video where I played 15 cozy games, which I will link in the description if you want to watch that one next, I played a game called Make Room that's really just about designing rooms, and I completely fell in love with it. Hozy for me scratches that same itch that Make Room did. If you're like me and you played The Sims as purely an interior design simulator, I think you'll really enjoy this game because it's basically that idea but as its own dedicated game. On to bugs. There was one level that I managed to bug out quite a lot. The game wanted me to remove the old wood and rotten floor panels and replace them with new ones. So after I'd taken them out, I started placing in the new tiles, and after doing this, I realized the game actually wanted me to pick up the old tiles and put them in the bin first. I tried picking them up, but because I'd already covered the floor with the new tiles, the game wanted me to pick up the old ones from underneath them. The only way I could see what I was doing was by hovering my mouse over the floor and seeing the highlighted edges of the old panels shining through the new ones. I'll admit, this one was mostly on me. I really didn't think about cleaning up the old tiles first, so I am going to take the L on that one. However, when I reloaded the level, I somehow managed to delete the entire box of the new tiles out of existence. I genuinely had no idea how I did that, but it meant that I couldn't finish the floor and move on to the next section, which basically soft-locked the level and forced me to restart it. After messing around with the game a little bit more, I realized there was a small section of the screen that if you just clicked on it whilst holding items, it just deletes them out of existence completely, which obviously becomes an instant softlock if it's something important like the tiles. Apart from that though, I didn't experience any other bugs whatsoever with the demo, which is actually really great going. Overall, Hozy ended up being a really enjoyable experience for me. The mix of restoring the houses, then getting the freedom to decorate them however you like is just super satisfying. And I think the game does a great job of making both the cleaning and the unpacking elements both feel great. Outbound is a cozy driving simulator where your main goal is to simply explore the world and light campfires along the way. From what I could tell in the demo, there doesn't really seem to be much more of an objective beyond that, so if you're going into this expecting a strong narrative or something a bit more, you're probably not going to find it here. Instead, the game seems to focus more on giving you a relaxing world to hang out in, especially with friends, as it's designed as a multiplayer experience for up to 4 players. I definitely enjoyed my time with Outbound, but for me, it wasn't quite as exciting as some of the other games on this list in terms of gameplay. The game is very simple. You're just dropped into this relatively large area and encouraged to explore it. And I think, again, this is another one that will be enjoyable when you play with friends. From looking at the map, the demo barely scratches the surface of the full world, so if you do end up enjoying this game, it definitely looks like something you could sink a lot of time into. You start out with a camper van, and you're basically wanting to upgrade the van and light 80 different campfires scattered around the world. In that sense, it feels a little bit like a collectathon, because not only are you hunting down these campfires, but you'll also come across things like gacha machines where you can collect little toys for your dashboard as well. As you explore the world, you'll run into obstacles like broken bridges that block you from progressing further into certain areas. To get past those, you'll need to gather materials and craft tools like an axe to chop down trees. So there's a light bit of survival and crafting mixed into this game too, but it wasn't anything majorly complex. I didn't really experience any bugs whilst playing this one, which is always a good sign, but there were a couple things that felt a little bit confusing at first. For example, when I planted a small garden in the back of my camper van, I realised that I needed water to keep the plants alive. After using the starter water that the game gives you, I assumed the logical thing to do would be to take the watering can down to the nearest river and fill it up, but you actually can't do that. Instead, the only way to refill water is by finding wells scattered around the map, and it took me a little while to figure that out because it's just not the most intuitive solution. Another small thing for me was the speed of the camper van. It's just very slow. For context, I could literally run faster than the van could drive me. I'm kind of assuming that in the full game you'll be able to upgrade the van and improve things like speed and performance, and if that's the case, I think that would make driving feel a lot better. I actually really enjoy games where you can just drive around endlessly, upgrading vehicles and improving them over time, and personally for me, one of my favourite of all those kind of games is one called Motor Town. Although I'm not usually a car person, the amount you could do in that with the cars, like upgrades, customizations, running taxi services, doing deliveries, it was just very exciting to me. Although it didn't brand itself as one, to me it was the perfect cozy driving game. Anyway, I only mention this because I hope in the future Outbound takes inspiration from that. It doesn't have to be complex with its upgrade systems, but if this is a game about driving your camper van, it would be really cool if you could customize it a lot more than I think the game will offer based on this screen right here. I can just picture people sharing their different customizations with each other online, and not even just in terms of vehicle mechanics. I think of things like decals and paints and custom wheels. So overall, although this one personally didn't fully click with me as a cozy game that I'd want to keep playing long term, I can definitely see this heading in a place that would grab me. If you enjoy slower, more relaxed exploration games where the main goal is just kind of wandering and vibing around in the world, especially with friends, then I think you're probably going to have a really good time with this one. The Last Gas Station is an adventure simulation game where you take over a rundown gas station and small shop. Your goal is to revive and grow this forgotten business while uncovering the mysterious fate of its previous owner. To start off, I absolutely love this one. This is the first demo I played that genuinely felt really polished throughout. There's a progression system where you can upgrade your store, and I managed to get mine to level 2 during the demo. Even that just single upgrade changed so much with the store, having a whole lot more space to sell things, and there was even more storage for wares, and the building itself didn't look nearly as run down anymore. It felt like an insane upgrade just for level 2, so I can only imagine how much further you'll be able to upgrade it in the future. There's also a little bit of story running alongside the gameplay. Certain characters will come into the store and talk to you, and little events will start to unfold as you keep playing. For example, I kept waking up throughout the night to this huge truck pulling up outside, and night after night I'd have to tell the guy that we're not open at night. The next day, this owl comes into the shop and starts going on about how the area is dangerous and that we should be afraid. Eventually, we actually meet this guy who's been showing up at night, and he's convinced that we're working with the government and aliens to kidnap people. We obviously convince him that we're not, but that night our character gets an idea. From this, you can actually start to turn your gas station into one of those really wacky themed roadside stores like the ones you sometimes see near places like Area 51. You can start focusing on selling a certain theme of product, for example alien themed items, and then decorate your store to match that theme in order to boost sales. I just want to say that although I was enjoying this game up until this point, I would say that there are a lot of different shopping sims out there already, but this concept of making the gas station themed really excited me. I already wanted to make my entire store have dumb little alien decorations everywhere, and I'm really curious to see what other themes they add as well. I've got my fingers crossed for something like a vampire one. I think it's a brilliant idea and it adds a lot of uniqueness to the game. The pixel art style is also stunning. Pixel art is one of those styles that people sometimes assume is simple because it looks minimal, but it's actually really difficult to get right. Developing a clear style and making everything readable while working with such a small number of pixels is really impressive, so huge respect to the game devs for making something that looks this beautiful. On the coziness scale as well, the character designs are just adorable. Everyone in the world's an animal, and when customers come into the store, they grab their little baskets and wander around browsing the shelves. It's honestly just really cute to watch. I thoroughly enjoyed the demo for this one, and it's one of the few games here where I really felt the urge to keep playing even after I finished recording. I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on this one because I'm really looking forward to jumping back into it when the full release comes out. Yep. This one was it. I mean, it was definitely targeted towards me as someone who's really into music and pretty much goes to the local record store once a week just to browse the shelves, so I don't think it's any surprise that I really ended up enjoying this one. Going into it, I didn't really know what to expect. Part of me assumed there probably wouldn't be too much depth to the game, but it actually ended up exceeding my expectations quite a bit. The basic premise is that you're a new employee at a record store, and when customers come in, they'll tell you a little bit about the record that they're looking for. It's then up to you to browse the shelves and find a record that matches their description so you can recommend it to them. In that regard, the game leans a little bit more towards a puzzle game, which if you followed the channel for a little bit, you'll know that I love puzzle games. Sometimes you'll get easier requests, like someone asking for a specific artist, but most of the time it's a lot more vague than that. During the demo, I had things like someone asking for something from a local artist, and the only reason I was able to recommend the correct record was because earlier in the game, I'd been paying attention to a conversation with someone from a band who had mentioned that they were playing locally. You can read descriptions on the records themselves, inspect their cover art, read blog posts about the bands, and listen to the people talking about them around the store to get a feel for what vibe they kind of have so you can make the right recommendations. Along that main gameplay element, there's also an overarching story of the store owner and her feud with her old bandmates that unfolds as you play. There's also smaller activities mixed in as well, like playing on the arcade machine or cleaning up the notice board. All of that together makes the game feel mechanically interesting rather than just being a simple recommendation simulator. editor. For me though, the biggest appeal of this game is just the sheer creativity that's gone into it. Even if you're not normally into these kind of games, there's so much to look at and explore that it's genuinely just fun walking around the store and seeing everything that's been created for it. Just in the short demo, I saw so many cool little details. At one point, another staff member came into the store and showed me his zine that had pages about supporting local venues. At another point, someone asked me to design a poster for their band where I could place stickers wherever I wanted before it got hung up in the shop window. So although it's a game about selling records, there's also so much other stuff going on alongside that too. Every little doodle in the game has its own unique style, and it really makes you want to slow down and take everything in, or at least it did for me. And if you like the art style you're seeing on screen, you're gonna have a great time just looking through all the different vinyl covers and appreciating the creativity behind them. There's also a huge variety of music genres represented, from pop to metalcore, so you can actually listen to some of the records in the store using a jukebox. I love that they went as far as creating actual songs in the style of these fictional artists so you can get a sense of what they sound like too. Overall, this is definitely one I'll be coming back to when the full game releases. For me, the biggest strength is its style and creativity, and I also didn't experience any bugs during the demo, which is always a big bonus. I will say though, this is one of those kind of games where you'll probably know immediately if it's for you or not. If you don't like what you're seeing on screen right now, then it's probably not going to win you over later, because the game delivers exactly what it promises. But if the vibe and the art style appeal to you even just a little bit, I really recommend giving the demo a try. I was only mildly interested in this before playing, and after spending some time with it, I'm now genuinely excited for the full release. And if you played recommendation style games before and enjoyed them, like Tiny Bookshop for example, this is another one that has a really cool vibe that I think you'll love. Witchspire is basically a magical survival adventure where you play as a witch or a wizard dropped into an enchanted world where you can gather resources and build up a home. You'll also meet all sorts of creatures, and if you're lucky, you'll be able to tame these as familiars to help you out on your adventures. From the very little research I did, it seems like the development team is very open to feedback, and that's always a really encouraging sign, especially for a project of this scale. Making a game like this, for example like open world, is a huge undertaking, and if this is the team's first game, as Steam seems to suggest, then honestly, huge respect to them for aiming this high. It's clear there are some interesting ideas here that could grow into something really solid with time and iteration. Unfortunately, I did run into quite a few issues whilst playing this demo. The game drops you straight into the world with very little explanation. There's not really any lore setup or introduction, and you aren't really given any much direction about what your overall goal is supposed to be. The first thing the game asks you to do is gather wood and build a crafting bench, which is straightforward enough, but beyond that, the sense of purpose just starts to feel unclear. One of the biggest hurdles for me was the lack of tutorialization. For example, the game asks you to level up your familiar, but it doesn't really indicate where you're supposed to do that. After clicking around the interface for a while, I eventually realized that a certain button was clickable, and that's where the upgrade menu was hiding. After that, I was tasked with creating a half, and once I built it, the next objective was just simply to level it up. At this point, I was a little confused because I wasn't really sure what the half did yet, and I was hoping that upgrading it might unlock something new or explain its purpose. So I did it, I leveled up the half, and then the next task was just to level it up again. Without really knowing what I was working towards, it started to feel like grinding for the sake of grinding. If the game showed more clearly what upgrading things unlocks, like new buildings or other mechanics, it would make doing those tasks feel more rewarding and like I would want to do them to get the cool thing. I still to this day don't know what making and upgrading the half did. The game didn't tell me, and I didn't play long enough of the demo to get to a point where I figured it out for myself, but I do wish the game would have mentioned the incentives, especially since that was literally the first 3 tasks to make and upgrade this. The world itself is also a little bit of a mixed bag. Visually, it can actually be quite beautiful, and the environments look really nice, but at the moment it doesn't feel like it's got much going for it. It's a little bit empty. Most of what you'll find whilst exploring are enemies, and there isn't much else encouraging you to wander off the beaten path just yet. Adding more discoveries or points of interest rather than just pockets of enemies in this really large map could actually help the world feel more alive. There are also some really smaller usability things that I noticed. At the moment, there aren't many settings options available, like mouse sensitivity adjustments, and I couldn't find a controls page either. The start screen does mention that certain features like controller support aren't fully implemented yet, which is fair for a demo, but combined with the lack of tutorials, it did make learning the controls a little bit confusing at times. I just think a little bit more in-depth tutorial and motivations would really sort out a lot of issues I have with this game. Another just first thing to mention is that this game is described as a monster collector, and it took me quite a while to realise that was actually part of the gameplay. When you defeat monsters, these glowing blue orbs appear, and after several fights I eventually received a new pet from one. It's a cool idea, but because my RNG is absolutely horrendous, it took me like an hour and a bit into this game until I got an orb, and it isn't really explained clearly when I did spot the orb, so the mechanic kind of just sneaks up on you rather than feeling like a system that you're actively engaging with and know what's going on. Once again, I often play these games without looking anything up beforehand, since I like my impressions to be a lot more subjective and free from any outside influence or reviews. I think had I watched the trailer or read that it was a monster collecting game, I might not have been so confused about what this orb did. That said, I feel like I shouldn't have to do that just to figure out the basics. The game itself should make it clear on what my character can do within the world and the creatures around them. Overall, just a bit of lack of explanation left me feeling confused quite a lot of the time. I'd definitely be interested in seeing how this game develops because there is a lot of potential here. It does currently feel like the demo might have been released a little early in terms of overall polish and clarity, but I do know that this demo came out not long after a playtest, so I think that this game is more of a playtest than a demo, and the devs are using it to gather feedback and improve things. The game is currently planned for an early access release later this year, so hopefully the team has time to refine a lot of these systems before then. I did fill out a playtest survey to share some of the issues that I ran into, and if you do end up trying the demo for yourself, I'd definitely recommend leaving feedback as well. Whether you enjoy the game or not, giving the developers clear information about what worked and what didn't is really valuable to them, as it helps them understand what players want and allows them to shape the game into something stronger. Like I mentioned at the start, this is a very ambitious project, and I genuinely wish the team the best with it. With more guidance for players, clearer progression, and just some extra polish, this could absolutely grow into something that a lot of people would end up enjoying. I swear, I didn't plan for this video to include so many games where I'm working in a store, but I guess a lot of the demos lately just happen to be store worker simulators. Inkonbini in particular probably takes the coziest approach out of all the store games I've played so far. It feels less like a traditional simulator and more like a relaxing, almost ASMR style experience. I'd probably describe it as a visual novel with a bit more gameplay layered on top. You play as Makoto on her first night shift alone at her auntie's convenience store, and your main job is to prepare the store for customers by stocking the shelves, making sure the items are in the correct places and facing the right direction and stuff like that before opening. One thing I really loved was the atmosphere. At the start of the demo there's rain outside and it just creates a really cozy vibe inside the shop. I actually was a bit disappointed when the rain stopped because I'm the type of person who really enjoys the sound of rain both in and out of games. I'm looking at you, rainy Animal Crossing music. So it made the whole experience feel even more relaxing. Like I mentioned earlier though, I tend to prefer games that have a bit more gameplay depth. This one leans much more heavily into dialogue and atmosphere, and that doesn't mean it's bad at all, it just means I'm probably not the exact target audience for it. If you enjoy dialogue heavy games where characters talk about their lives and worries while you slowly potter around doing small tasks in the background, I think you're probably going to really enjoy what this game is going for. Games like this work because of the slower atmosphere, but one thing I just couldn't shake from my head is that I still find the concept of an atmospheric convenience store game just really funny in general. Like, imagine a UK version of this. Big Tesco, one store, many stories, coming soon. I do think some of the people who are reviewing this game maybe sensationalize the cuteness of Japan a little bit. I found some comments about the game and one person said, "Spent 2 years in Japan and their stores are just like anywhere else. The notion that it's some appreciable experience is laughable." Konbinis have become so popular with tourists because of things like streamers and influencers popping into them during their stay in Japan that Japanese locals literally give konbini tours to visit their chains. The game definitely focuses on narrative and ambience, but there is still some interactive elements that I enjoyed. When customers come in, you have to scan their items properly, which means turning the products around to find the barcode and scanning them, giving them the correct change. It's actually quite satisfying and feels much more relaxed than something like the last gas station, because there's no time pressure to run around and do it for another customer or restock whilst you're serving. You can take as long as you like and there's no penalty for going slowly. As for my negatives, I do think the character walks a little too slowly. I understand that the game is aiming for a calm, cozy pace, and I'm not saying that the character needs to be sprinting around the store, but when you're trying to search for where items belong, it can start to feel like the slow movement is just padding things out a bit. Another issue I had early on was figuring out where certain items were supposed to go. When you're new to the game, it's not always obvious where things belong, and during the demo, I ended up wandering around with some bottles in my basket for quite a while because I couldn't figure out the correct shelf for them. There's also a slightly odd moment when customers come into the store, they tend to immediately comment on things that you've done wrong, like if a shelf isn't fully stocked blocked or an item isn't facing the right way. The feedback itself makes sense for gameplay purposes to let you know that you haven't done something correctly, but the way it's delivered can just feel weirdly harsh for a game that's otherwise going for such a cozy and relaxing vibe. Like, why is this guy coming in and telling me I've done my job wrong? Combined with the fact that there isn't really any clear feedback about whether you've placed items correctly, it can feel a little bit like a guessing game with some things. For example, I couldn't really tell if the game wanted me to put these magazines together or if it's okay if they're all spread out a bit. One thing that's also been mentioned quite a bit in the game's reviews is the language used in the environment. The game is set in Japan, but some players have noticed that writing on the products and shelves appears to be mostly gibberish rather than real Japanese characters, with some kanji being backwards or mixed in with Korean Hangul. I personally don't speak Japanese, so I wouldn't have noticed this myself, but it's something that people have highlighted when leaving feedback. Some have also said that the Japanese voice and text feels slightly unnatural, as if they might have been translated by a non-native speaker. I think it's worth mentioning because it's been a common point of criticism and something the developers may want to address in the future.
ある種の特別な魅力がある。冷蔵庫の稼働音がブーンと静かにリズムを刻んだ。
Overall though, it's a really chill experience. It's essentially a visual novel style game with sections in between where you can walk around and interact with the store. I imagine it'll become a bit more lively when there's more customers to manage at once rather than just one person at a time. At the end of the day, this is very much a game for people who enjoy extremely slow-paced, low-pressure experiences. If you like a game that lets you completely switch off and just do small tasks without any real challenge, then I think you'll probably find this one really cozy. Muri Wildwoods is a cozy game where you play as Pell, a Muri who is heading out on their first ever mission as a cleaner. You explore a completely new island and restore the beach as you go using your Super Soaker. Essentially, the game feels like a much cozier version of Power Wash Simulator. If you enjoy that type of gameplay but want something with cuter aesthetics, a light narrative, and plenty of adorable critters to pet along the way, then this game will probably be right up your alley. The main gameplay has you traveling around the island, finding patches of what look like oil and washing it away. One thing I really like is that you don't need to remove every bit of oil before something is considered clean. Once you've cleaned the majority of it, the object will pop clean automatically. I think this design choice really helps the cozy vibe of the game because you're not stressing about getting every single pixel spotless. You just focus on cleaning the most of it and enjoying the process. When you clear an area completely of the corruption, the environment bursts back into colour and life, which is kind of cute to see. There's a main story you can progress by cleaning specific areas. As you remove the corruption, things like roots blocking your path will unfurl, and mushrooms will appear that you can jump on to reach new locations. At the same time, there's also optional side paths that you can explore and clean. Completing these areas will unlock drawings in your little sketchbook, so if you enjoy completing games or trying to 100% everything, there's a nice incentive to explore these extra areas. I also noticed that you collect small water points while clearing corruption. It seems like these might be used later in the game somehow, so exploring side areas to gather more of them could end up being useful too. At the start of the demo, I was curious to see if you could swim, and it turns out that you can. When I tried it, I accidentally discovered a small hidden area and found a new critter that I would have completely missed otherwise. Doing that unlocked a new doodle in my sketchbook, and I really like that the game rewards exploration like this rather than focusing only on the main cleaning objectives. Throughout the game, there is also a group of characters who guide you on your journey through group chat messages. Their messages pop up occasionally to give you encouragement, make little jokes, and talk about what's going on. They also help guide you in the right direction, so they sort of function as a tutorial system without the game just throwing plain text instructions at you. It gives the game a little bit more personality and makes you feel less alone whilst exploring. One thing I will say though is that the gameplay can start to feel a little repetitive if you play for a long stretch. This feels like the kind of game that would work best in shorter sessions rather than sitting down and playing for hours at a time. Seeing the areas return to life after cleaning them is really satisfying at first, but towards the end of the demo I noticed I was just cleaning and moving on without really stopping to watch it happen. That is partly because you end up cleaning similar rocks and corals over and over again. I do hope the full release includes variety of environments rather than just only beach areas. I'm fairly confident that this will be the case though, especially since the Steam page mentions over 1,000 different objects to clean. Overall, I think cozy game fans are going to really enjoy this one. It captures that relaxing atmosphere that a lot of people look for without feeling completely mindless. I also didn't experience any bugs during the demo, which is really impressive considering there's some platforming involved as well. It's just a very promising demo, and this one has gone straight onto my wishlist. I've never really been someone who plays hidden object games because the idea of them usually puts me off a bit, but this one actually managed to reinvent that concept for me. There's so much creativity going on here, and huge respect to the artists who worked on it because there are thousands of tiny objects scattered throughout the scenes that you can click on and interact with. One of my favourite features is your bedroom, which acts as your personal space that you can decorate however you like. The decoration system is actually really flexible here. You can rotate and flip items, and unlike a lot of decorating systems where objects are locked to a grid, here you can place things pretty much wherever you want. There's also a layering system that lets you move objects in front or behind others, which opens up lots of possibilities when designing your room. Even from just the tutorial pop-up, it's clear that there's going to be loads of ways to customize the space, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the kinds of rooms people end up creating. This decoration also ties into the gameplay. Outside your room there's a van where you can buy furniture and other items, and many of these come in themed bundles based on the levels that you've completed. For example, I played a tea room level, and once I finished it, I unlocked a set of items from that scene that I could purchase and place in my room. It's great that it does that because it gives you a reason to keep playing through the levels. Alongside that, the game also has this little comic style panel cutscenes that help add some personality to everything. All of these elements combined make the experience feel much more than a standard hidden object game, and even though this isn't normally a genre I spend much time with, I found myself quite engaged because there was always something new to click on, inspect or interact with. That being said, there were a couple negatives that I did notice during my time with the demo. The first one is optimization. During some of the loading screens, the game lagged quite heavily to the point where my mouse didn't move at all. It didn't really affect the gameplay itself, but it was noticeable. The other thing I want to mention is something that a lot of negative reviews also bring up. For a game that otherwise presents itself as very cute and cozy, there are a few moments that just feel really out of place. The game clearly leans into an anime and manga style, which is totally fine, but it also includes a few tropes that don't really match the wholesome atmosphere that the rest of the game aims for. For example, in one of the early chapters, there are these bunny girl characters lounging over people's laps, and there's no bunny guys either. And in another level set in a cat cafe, there's a man hiding in the bushes stalking this girl. When you click him, the character notices, she freaks out, and he runs away. I don't really see why this needed to be added into the game, and it just left me feeling a bit uncomfortable. There are also a few other interactions that feel like they're trying to be comedic, but just end up making me feel disgusted instead, like clicking on this character who has purposely been drawn to be larger than the other girls, and when you do it, it removes her food and she becomes happy. I just really don't like what this is trying to say. Moments like these are somewhat common in anime and are pretty much universally hated, so it just felt a bit strange seeing it in a game that otherwise presents itself as a relaxing and wholesome experience. Like, the game is literally tagged as wholesome, yet there's a peeping Tom in it. It's a shame because outside those moments I was actually really enjoying the game. I just wanted to mention them since they're not really shown in any of the trailers, and it's something that players might want to be aware of when deciding if this game is for them. Overall though, despite those just weird moments, the game is visually very cute and the art style is full of effort and creativity. I especially enjoyed the room decoration system and the amount of detail packed into each scene. If you enjoy hidden object games or creative decoration mechanics, then there's definitely quite a lot here to appreciate on that regard. I would play it in the future if they reconsidered some of the more egregious stuff. My Card is Better Than Your Card is a cute roguelike deck builder where you create your own cards using stickers. Instead of collecting pre-made cards, you'll build them yourself by combining different sticker effects, experimenting with combos, and shaping a deck that fits your playstyle, all to fight other kids on the school playground. It's pretty common in games like this, but progression here feels very reliant on good RNG if you want to get anywhere. The difficulty can be surprisingly intense too. The cute art style may make it look like a relaxed game, but some of the battles can be really tough, because if you don't get lucky with your stickers that you're offered, you could end up getting completely overwhelmed by some of the other kids that you face. For some people, that kind of challenge is going to be a huge part of the fun. For me though, it just didn't feel that rewarding, but this is a personal preference. I tried to build more balanced cards that could handle different situations, but the game seemed to encourage stacking everything into one extremely strong card and just relying on that over and over again. Because of that, the customization aspect of the cards felt a little less meaningful for me than I'd expected. There were also moments where the difficulty spiked quite suddenly. I played against one opponent and found the match fairly manageable, but the very next round she was suddenly gaining 6 to 10 stars each turn. At that point, all I could really do was try to cancel out some of these points rather than actually pushing back towards a win. Even when I was drawing my better cards, it still felt like I had very little chance on catching up. With the starter cards especially, it sometimes felt that losing was inevitable if the opponent had stronger cards that I simply didn't have access to yet. Another thing that really stood out to me is how your deck gradually fills up with cards that you just can't remove. You can't delete older cards, and at the end of the day, day, you're required to add another one whether you want to or not. Over time, this creates quite a bit of deck bloat, and that means stronger cards that you've built might not even show up consistently because you're relying on the RNG to draw them, while your opponent often seems to have very well-tuned decks every single time. I will say though that I'm probably not the exact target audience for this style of game. People who enjoy really challenging deck builders might actually love this system. If you enjoy experimenting with different strategies, restarting runs to find the best setup, and placing stickers to maximize every card's potential, then the difficulty here might actually feel much more rewarding to you. One small mistake in your build can have big consequences, and that kind of high stakes gameplay can be very appealing if that's your type of game. Despite the challenge, I actually did still have a lot of fun with it overall. One of the biggest highlights for me is the visual style, and the presentation gives the game a lot of personality. I can also easily see fans of the genre getting that classic just one more round feeling and suddenly realizing that they've been playing for hours longer than they'd initially planned. If you're like me and expected something a little bit more relaxed based on the art style, it might not quite hit that cozy gameplay feeling. This definitely leans more towards a competitive deck builder experience. That being said though, the game is currently in early access and the developers are actively updating it. They've already made balance adjustments, including reducing the difficulty in certain modes and with certain characters, and they're continuing to add new stickers, new opponents, bug fixes, and other improvements. So if you're on the fence about it, it might be worth keeping an eye on how the game develops over time. With ongoing updates and balancing, this could continue to grow into something really special for fans of this kind of strategy deck building game. I honestly don't think there's much to fault with this game. It doesn't promise anything that it doesn't deliver on, and I think most people will know pretty quickly whether it's something they'll enjoy just by watching a little bit of the gameplay. Starting with the positives, it's very clear that a lot of love has gone into making this. I had a look at the website and it seems like this game is being developed by a team of only 3 people, which is incredibly small. Projects like that always impress me, especially when the end result feels this polished. I know this game had some delays in the past, so I genuinely wish the team the best with the release because it looks like something they put a lot of care into. Just to explain the game a little bit, there isn't really a traditional puzzle element here. The best way I describe it is like a colouring book in game form. Instead of filling out pages, you're completing small 3D wooden dioramas. You'll have a list of pieces on the side of the screen and you drag them into the correct places within the scene until everything is complete. One thing that surprised me was there's actually a narrative running through the game. In the demo, we follow a character called Foxy across several dioramas. We learn that she used to live in the city but has now moved to the countryside to spend the summer in a village. The move doesn't exactly go smoothly though, as she quickly ends up being chased around by some very persistent local geese. The demo ends with her meeting a new character called Ben, who I assume will play a bigger role later on and possibly introduce some new dioramas to build when the full game releases. Of course, the art style is really the main attraction here. As the title suggests, everything in the game looks like it's made from carved wood, but the shapes are rounded and soft, so the environments still feel a little inviting. It clearly takes inspiration from those classic wooden toys that a lot of people grew up with, and I think the developers absolutely nailed that aesthetic. It's very distinctive and works perfectly with the relaxing tone of the game, especially when combined with things like the shallow depth of field and the calm soundtrack. There's also a good amount of visual variety between the different scenes. Each level feels quite different from the last, which makes it fun to see what kind of environment you're going to be assembling next. The core mechanic itself is very simple though. You'll essentially be doing the same activity throughout the whole game. Because of that, this feels like the kind of game that works best in short sessions. Playing a level or two in an evening will probably be perfect, whereas playing many levels in one go might start to feel a bit repetitive. For me personally, the only thing that I didn't quite land was the way the narrative is presented. The game leans very heavily into this like philosophical kind of language. For example, the website describes this game as something that heals and comforts, like sharing a hot tea with a grandmother by the fire. I understand what they're going for, and it definitely fits the wholesome tone of the game, but for me it felt like it was just trying a bit too hard to emphasize that cozy feeling. Like, what do you mean by that statement?
The day my life changed, I was exiled into this hostile environment, unsuitable for any modern soul.
It's not really a flaw with the game itself, it's just more of a personal preference, where the writing style sometimes feels slightly over-dramatic compared to the story that's actually being told, and occasionally the phrasing reminds me of those sentences that feel a little bit unusual because they've been translated between languages. I'm not saying that the game is translated, I just think it's very metaphorical, and some of the metaphors felt like they were thrown in for the writing's sake of it, not because it would be something that someone would actually say. Again though, that's purely a taste thing. Some players might actually find that kind of storytelling really chill, still, I would say the game The Last Campfire does that storybook writing style a little bit better for me, with this one being a bit more targeted towards children. Overall, if the concept of assembling little wooden dioramas appeals to you, then I think you're probably going to have a really nice time with this game. It's relaxing and it's clearly made with a lot of care. Even though the narrative didn't fully click for me, the atmosphere and presentation are strong enough that I could easily see cozy game fans enjoying this. Trash Goblin is a game all about cleaning up little trinkets in your shop and selling them to the various people who pass by. You start with a bag filled with random items that are completely covered in dirt. The first step is chiseling away at the grime to reveal what the object actually is, and then once it's uncovered, you can clean it up using a sponge. In the demo, those are the main tools that you have, along with something called an upcycler, although I imagine in the full game you can upgrade your tools over time. The upcycler though is where things get a little bit more interesting, as any restored items can be upcycled. This means that you can combine different trinkets together to make entirely new objects. These crafted items can help you better match a specific customer request, and they usually sell for a higher value as well. It's a nice system that adds a bit of creativity to what would otherwise be a very straightforward cleaning mechanic. The gameplay itself is very simple and doesn't vary too much throughout the demo. Even though the loop is quite repetitive, I actually found it really relaxing, and this feels like one of those perfect sick day games where you're at home, you're wrapped in a blanket, not really wanting to think too hard about anything. It's the kind of game I could easily play whilst listening to a podcast or some music in the background. Some games demand too much attention for that, but this one works really well as a more laid-back experience. Customers will occasionally come into your shop, and this is where the game leans into a more visual novel style type of game. Some customers are just random strangers passing through, but others are recurring characters that you can interact with. They'll tell you a little bit about their lives, what they're doing, and what's happening in the world outside your shop. I actually found myself looking forward to new customers arriving, not just for their money, but because I wanted to see the new character designs. Every person looks completely different from the last, and they all have their own personalities, which the art style across the whole game does a great job of bringing to life. One thing I do think that could make this part of the game a bit more engaging would be some kind of negotiation system. At the moment, when a customer makes an offer, you can either accept it or turn them away. It might be fun if there was a small haggling mini game where if you succeeded, you could push the price up a little bit. It's also worth mentioning that if you're looking for a deeper shop management game but you're not a fan of visual novels, this one might not be for you. There isn't really much management involved. The focus is very much on cleaning the objects and chatting with the customers rather than running the shop itself. Another thing to note is that unlike some of the other cleaning games, you don't actually need to remove every single speck of dirt before an item is considered finished. Similar to something like Muri Wildwoods, the game will mark the item as complete once most of the grime has been removed. This can be a good thing if you want a very relaxed experience where perfection isn't required. On the other hand, if you're someone who likes everything to be completely spotless, it might feel a little bit frustrating when the game ends the cleaning little mini game while there's still quite a lot of small patches of dirt left behind. Overall though, the game has a really cozy atmosphere, and it's a simple idea that's easy to sink into for short sessions. If you enjoy low pressure games with cool looking characters, then Trash Goblin would be definitely one to check out. Strange Antiques is a cozy puzzle adventure game where you take over a small occult shop in the town of Undermere. Instead of running a typical shop management sim, the game is mostly about examining mysterious artifacts and figuring out what they are, what they do, and recommending them to the right customers. The way you identify these items is where most of the gameplay happens. Each object can be examined in different ways, looking at its shape, inscriptions, materials, and sometimes even using different senses like touching or listening to it for clues. You'll constantly be cross-referencing books and various bits of research to piece together what an artifact actually is. Over time, you'll build up a fairly large collection of reference material, which makes the whole process feel a little bit more like a detective puzzle game. Customers will come in throughout the day asking for items that solve very specific problems. Sometimes they'll describe a symbol or a type of magical property that they're looking for. Early on, the requests are fairly straightforward, but as the demo developed, it actually became much more complicated, requiring you to pay attention to small details in order to get it correct. Outside of the shop, there are also moments where you explore the surrounding town of Undermere. Using a map, you can travel to different locations and uncover more of the story behind what's happening in the area. There's an underlying supernatural mystery running throughout the game, and the choices that you make whilst helping customers can influence how that story unfolds and which ending you get. One of the strongest parts of the game is definitely the atmosphere. The whole thing has this cozy but eerie vibe with the art style, the music, the sound design, and they all work really well together to create that feeling. That being said, I don't think this is a game that will appeal to everyone. This game is very heavily focused on reading and researching, so if you're not into puzzle or deduction games and prefer to skip out on the reading, it might feel a little bit slow for you. Another thing is, this game is the sequel to Strange Horticulture, a game that I have previously played, and it follows a very similar structure. There's nothing wrong with that, because if you like the first game, it's just more of the same, but if you was expecting something different or fresh, you're just really not going to find it here. Overall though, Strange Antiques is a really interesting puzzle game. It's got a very distinctive atmosphere and some fun little puzzles to solve, so if you do enjoy that and uncovering strange mysteries piece by piece, or you just kind of like the vibe of what you're seeing on the screen now, then this is definitely one worth checking out. Just be prepared to spend a lot of time flipping through books. Discounty is a game where you run a supermarket in the middle of a small town. Your main job is to plan the layout of your shop, order and organize stock, and make sure customers are served properly throughout the day. But the store management isn't the only focus of the game. Outside of work, you can explore the town, meet the locals, and help them out with little side quests that gradually build relationships and unlock new things for your shop. For me, the store management was easily the highlight of this demo. It actually ends up being a bit more fast-paced than the rest of the game, but never so overwhelming that you're running around in complete chaos. I found myself constantly thinking things like, do I have enough time to restock these shelves before the next customer reaches the counter? And it just made it feel a little bit more exciting than something like Inkonbini that goes for a more slower cozy game. At the same time, it's still quite manageable to keep on top of everything, and from what I've seen online, later in the game you can even start automating parts of the store. I'm assuming this is from hiring other staff, I don't really know, but it suggests that the gameplay will shift from doing everything yourself to optimizing the shop more strategically. When you're not working your shift, you can actually wander around the town and meet different characters who live there. In the demo, you're given a few small tasks to introduce yourself to some of them. One example involves the local fisherman who you're trying to convince to supply products to your store. That leads you to another character who wants you to sell off some of her leftover fish stock that nobody else wanted. To help with that, you end up speaking to the local hardware shop owner who gives you a small fish tank that you can place inside your store. Any shelves that are nearby that fish tank that sell fish products get a small boost that increases their chance of selling. I like this a lot because it adds a lot more strategy to you designing your store's layout with different decorations and the bonuses that come from them. Traveling around the town is fun, but there's always this small sense of urgency hanging over you because your shift starts at 9 AM every day. The store will open whether you're there or not, so if you're late, it could cause problems. In some ways, I actually kind of like this because it adds a bit of realism to the world. With the town not stopping around you, you've just got to make sure that you're punctual. At the same time, if you're someone like me who gets a bit anxious about scheduled events, not only in games but in real life too, it can make you hesitate before you start bigger tasks whilst exploring the town. I had a few moments where I thought, maybe I shouldn't start this yet in case I don't make it back to the shop in time. That definitely was more of a personal thing than a flaw with the game itself, but it's something I noticed whilst playing the demo, and if you're like me, you might not enjoy that. Overall though, the start of Discounty does a really good job of introducing its main ideas. The shop management is satisfying, and I experienced no bugs. The town feels lively, with lots of characters to meet, and the systems for decorating and optimizing your store look like they could become really interesting as the game opens up further. Thank you so much for watching. That's all for the demos that I checked out for this video. There were definitely a few here that really surprised me, and some that I think have a lot of potential once they're a bit further along in development. Cozy games are still absolutely thriving right now, especially from smaller indie teams, and it's always fun jumping into these demos to see what new ideas people are experimenting with. If there are any games in this video that caught your eye, I definitely recommend checking out the demos for yourself whilst they're still available and giving the developers some feedback. And if there are any other cozy game demos that you think I should try out next time, feel free to let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching again, and I will see you all in the next one.